So you spent your whole date getting to know each other, talking about me.
Don't flatter yourself. No, we did not spend the whole time talking about you.
Things are getting spicy in the trial of Vallow Daybell in Maricopa County, Arizona, as she tries to defend herself against charges that she conspired with her brother, Alex Cox, to murder her estranged husband, Charles Vallow. Good afternoon. I'm Angenette Levy, and you are watching us live during our lunch show Q&A here during the trial of Vallow Daybell. We are taking your questions as we always do, so please drop them in the YouTube chat. We love taking them, and I have a great group of people with me here today. Kurt Altman is a defense attorney and former prosecutor in Arizona, so he is here with us. And also Gigi McKelvey, she is the host of the Pretty Lies and Alibis podcast, also works with us here at Law&Crime, and she's an expert on this case. She's been following every detail of it from the very beginning and actually covered Chad and Lori's trials in Idaho, rather. So Gigi, let's check in with you first to talk about what has been going on today. Things got a little bit heated almost on cross-examination because Lori's brother, Adam Cox, he was on the stand testifying for the prosecution, and he was trying to help Charles Vallow help his sister.
Yeah, I mean, Charles reached out to Adam. Things were just getting really scary for Charles. Adam was the only person that would return his calls, so they formulated a plan for Adam to fly from Kansas into Arizona and help try and stage an intervention with Lori's family to maybe try to loosen her from whatever this grip had on her. And so Charles actually paid for Adam's flight to come to Arizona, and he just testified about the plan that day, which was Charles, as we know, was planning to go pick up JJ. He had some errands to run, but they were still trying to figure out exactly how to do this intervention, whether it be just bring a decoy phone to sit on the counter and have a real one in the pocket recording her saying she's a translated being, or do the same thing at a family dinner. And Adam's goal was to take that to the stake president, at least to take away her temple recommend, which is very important in the LDS faith because she was going to the temple a big amount of times every day or week. That was really odd for anybody in the LDS faith. So he was there to help Charles, but unfortunately things happened before they ever got started.
Yeah, it's, it's just, this case is such a tragedy. And Charles, of course, was the first victim in all of this, according to the prosecution. So, it's just, I go back each time, Gigi, every time I think about this case, I go back to that body camera footage from January of 2019, where Charles tried to get help for Lori. And even though he was trying to divorce her, he was still trying to get her help. He loved her. So I thought his testimony was very powerful. And then Lori got kind of upset with her brother on cross-examination, but she kept it short. And that's really kind of what you have to do on cross-examination.
Yeah, and clearly he is not a fan of her green chili chicken enchiladas because he didn't
like that.
He's like, the ones I made every time we had a family gathering, 10 times a year. And he's like, I got nothing. And then it was more of, were you at Colby's wedding? No, you weren't. How often did we see each other? So I think what Lori was trying to do for this jury is to show them they weren't really that close. And maybe what he's testifying to is just what Charles told him. He had no direct knowledge of it. I think she was trying to minimize Adam's role in her life, and therefore trying to make this whole intervention seem less of a big issue than what it really was.
Yeah, you weren't close to me, that type of thing. So before the lunch break, Serena Sharp, Gigi, was on the stand. So talk to us a bit about Serena. She's a former friend of Lori's.
Yeah, Serena was introduced to Lori through Melanie Gibb, another player who testified at both the trials in Idaho. She was very close to Lori. It seems to me that Serena came in the group and was really not a big part of it for a long time because everything she was hearing, it wasn't computing with her as being in line with the LDS religion and what is taught in their churches. So, you question Lori, you're kicked out. You're dark. If you don't agree with her, you're gone. And Serena wasn't the only person it happened to, but I think out of that whole group, Serena was in it the least amount of time.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring Kurt Altman into this now. Kurt, I thought Lori did not, even though she got upset about the green chili chicken enchiladas or whatever, and that seemed to really irk her. And she does get emotional. She, at least on that cross-examination of her brother, she tried to make her points, and she got in and got out. She didn't get hung up on a bunch of stuff and let her emotions really, really get the best of her. And I felt like she got in and she got out.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was actually kind of excited, if that's the right word, to see her cross-examination because it was her brother, and she didn't make her points super well, but she was clearly going, "Hey, we don't know each other that well." I
Right.
did chuckle about the green chicken chili, but there was nothing much that she could have done with him. He said what he said. She's not going to discredit him. There wasn't much else she could do. She ended with, "Hey, you didn't see me or hear me or ever hear anything about me conspiring to kill Charles, right?" Which, sure, okay, I didn't see anything personally, but it
Right.
really opened the door for a pretty significant redirect examination.
Mm-hmm. What I thought was interesting was that even if maybe we'll have to see how effective it was, but I just was impressed that she controlled herself to a degree. I
Mhm.
didn't expect that after she kind of she let her emotions almost get the best of her with Nancy Joe yesterday, where she wanted to really know what Charles said about her in the text messages. And so I thought, and then she kind of had the lunch break to calm down, but I really thought, oh, she's going to lose it on her brother.
I kind of thought so too, but that's really the
Yeah.
role and probably
Oh.
the role they're playing very well of advisory council. After what they saw her losing her cool in court earlier, they're probably like, "Hey, this is not, they can't really do the legal stuff for it, but they can be like, this is not going well. You need to control that. That's not going to play well with the jury." I'm sure that that's what they're telling her, and she listened.
Yeah, maybe they've got Gigi. I'm wondering, the sheriff has the rack belt. Maybe they've got their own little system to kind of like jolt Lori. They've got something going on in that courtroom. So I heard Gigi, you kind of wanted to chime in on something with Adam.
Oh, no, I was just saying the same thing is, yesterday her emotions really did get the best of her, and it wasn't a cross-exam more than it was, I want to know what was said about me. It became that gossip element and not the facts of the case. And clearly, I thought the same thing. Her advisory council probably said, look, you need to take it down like 50 notches, because if you remember when we broke at lunch yesterday, it seemed like she was going to open that door, and the judge cautioned her against going there with that witness, because you're going to have to bring in the crimes in Idaho, the murders of the kids and all that. So we expected her to go full force after lunch, but I'm sure that advisory council is really cautioning her in the cross exam. And there are some big witnesses, her brother, we have Kay Woodcock, her former sister-in-law coming up today, another big emotional witness, because we all know Kay Woodcock got that life insurance policy. Charles changed it to her. And I'm sure Lori is very salty about that, because that really threw a wrench in all their plans. So we'll see if she can hold it together when Kay's on the stand. That's going to be the big test.
Yeah, that will be a huge test. All right, we've got some great questions coming in, so let's get to those questions. The first one is going to Gigi. This is from Nilo Rose. Pardon me if I mispronounce that. And I think this is directed to Serena's testimony. What do you think Lori's first question will be? And I'm assuming this is to Serena.
Well, it's probably not going to be about her green chili chicken enchiladas, but, I think what Lori's going to do is I think she's probably just going to minimize the amount of time they were together. It doesn't seem like it was this constant getting together. She lived in Connecticut, so she wasn't local. I think they did a couple of Zoom meetings, but I think Lori's probably just going to say, look, we met on this date. We really didn't talk after this date, and it's not a long period of time. So again, just minimizing what Christina may know about Charles and the conspiracy. So I kind of expect her to go that way. Like, you don't really know me all that well. We met a handful of times and that's it.
Yeah, that may be wise. So this one's for you, Kurt. This is from Hot Mess Mom TV. Some pro se defendants have advisory counsel, but some don't. Who makes that decision? Is it up to the defendant or the judge?
Again, I think we answered some of these questions like this the other day. It depends on the jurisdiction you're in, but I can tell you here in Arizona, if you're representing yourself as a pro se defendant, you get advisory counsel, even if you object. It's the law. Somebody has to be there. Now, how much that pro se defendant uses that advisory counsel, it's really up to them, but they will be there. Sometimes the defendant can make the decision that they don't want them to sit at the table with them, but there's advisory counsel somewhere and dealing with them behind the scenes in Arizona.
Right. And I think a lot of places would likely do that because, gosh, can you imagine just sitting there going it all on your own? I mean, it just seems like you're creating a nightmare scenario on appeal, even if you're waiving all of your rights to whatever. Still, I mean, it just seems like, Kurt, it could create a whole host of issues.
Oh, you're right, Angenette. A whole host of issues. I'll tell you, like you hit it right on the head. The Court of Appeals, they don't want to see somebody represent themselves in that record if they can help it. It's their right, so they're not going to stop it. The trial court doesn't want to see that if they can help it because it's just a mess. People say a lot of things about lawyers, but there's a reason they're there, and really it's to secure and preserve the system so the system works the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, most definitely. Gigi, let's go back to you. I meant to touch on this earlier, Gigi, but I feel like the stuff with Adam really blew my mind. So I kind of forgot to ask you about this. So this is a good question. This is from One Not Stressed. Is Lori aware that Colby is among the spectators? Because we saw this early in the chat, and I think you were talking about it too, that Colby, her son, Lori's son, her oldest son, is in the courtroom today.
He is, and he is sitting on the front row. When Lori came out, I did not see her look his way, but as we broke for lunch and we were all standing up to leave, I was getting my gear, I was one of the last out. He was still in the courtroom on the front row. She did glance over at him a couple of times. I did not see him look at her. He has his own YouTube channel. He has been very public that he actually did an interview with his mom and told her, you can't be in my kids' lives, and essentially I have to cut this off here. But no, doesn't seem like he looked at her, but I did catch a few glances his way once everybody was pretty much out of the courtroom.
Here is another question. Some of these questions I think are, there should be one of those /S's because I think they're sarcastic. But this is from Keyshawn Oz for Gigi. Can you identify Ned in the courtroom today? This whole Ned Snyder thing, Gigi, I can't imagine. What were the jurors doing? This is a mostly male jury, if not all male, I think. What were they doing sitting there watching Adam talk about all this stuff?
We kind of started to see it yesterday when one of the witnesses started bringing in the possession and talking about this evil entity. You could just see on their faces, it was sort of a brick wall. I mean, it was like, whoa. You could see their eyes they were leaning forward a bit. Body language is huge watching jurors. When it was mentioned that Lori was becoming a translated being, one juror kind of rolled his eyes and grinned just a bit. But now they're starting to get really interested. But you can see on a couple of the jurors' faces, may be confused because this case is so convoluted. And I mean, I've covered this for 5 years and sometimes I still get confused. So you're hearing these bits and pieces in the story about Nephi and Laban, and they people that aren't LDS may not understand it. Adam gave a brief description, but I really wish they would have brought back in those texts from Lori and Alex, where she said, I'm told I'll be like Nephi. And then after Charles is killed, there is a text message. It was a Nephi and Laban ending. And so according to Adam's story, Nephi killed Laban, I believe. And didn't really want to but had to. So I think maybe there is some confusion there when the religious stuff is referred to, because it gets really deep, especially when they're skewing it the way they do with their little splinter wackadoodle religion. So you do see a little confusion on the jurors' faces with that. But when Lori was up crossing Adam, you could see a few of the male jurors especially were amused at sort of this sibling rivalry on the stand. I mean, your sister is her own attorney and you are on the stand and you're under cross-examination by your sister who you share birthdays and Christmases with. It was awkward in there, to say the least. The atmosphere was a little heavy, but you could see a few of the jurors were amused, that especially with the enchilada thing. It got a giggle or two.
Yeah, no kidding. The enchiladas, I think everybody got a giggle. And, we might have a tease. I'm going to tease something, Gigi. Keep those enchiladas on your mind, because we might have a question about those coming up. Let's go to our next question. This one's for you, Kurt. So I hope you're familiar with your Son of Sam law type things going on. This is from Kimberly. Has she been denied? Has Lori been denied movie rights? Can she sell her story? And so we've got 2 states here. We've got Idaho. We've got Arizona. So is there a Son of Sam law in Arizona?
Actually, there's really not a law that will say that in Arizona, but and I can speak from experience in these cases. Cases like this, often if she's convicted, often at sentencing, the prosecution will ask the court for part of sentencing to be, hey, she can't profit from this, or if she does profit from this, because you can't really stop them from selling their story or telling their story, but she can't profit from it. She can't gain any pecuniary advantage from it. So if any money comes from it, could it go to a charity? Can it go to this or something like that? And a lot of courts will do that. A lot of judges will do that.
Yeah, that's interesting that there's nothing on the books there in Arizona. Maybe they've just never done that. But I feel like a lot of states do have those laws on the books. But obviously, I'm sure the prosecution in this case, if she's convicted, would ask for that. Let's go to another one for you, Kurt. This is from Surviva Ara. I don't understand why this trial is even on. She's already guilty in her other cases. And, I had a tweet about this today, Kurt. Somebody said to me, I can't even watch this, and she's already doing life in prison. But this is about Charles Vallow. The state is saying there has to be accountability for what happened to Charles, and we believe this was a crime.
I think that's right. I've had that question a lot, actually. And it makes sense, especially when you talk about the money that it costs and why are we doing this? She's already convicted. I think, Angenette, you hit it right on the head. Number one, Charles is a separate victim that took place in a separate jurisdiction. He has a right, and his family has a right to justice, and Arizona actually has a state interest in that justice. So that's the first reason. The second reason is she's convicted in Idaho, but that is certainly on appeal, and it's certainly going to be on appeal in Idaho for many, many years. If the state of Arizona decided to not do anything with this case, and something happened with that case in Idaho on appeal, like it got reversed for a technical issue or whatever it may be, there's a possibility, probably slim, but there's a possibility that she could walk out of jail before that next trial happened in Idaho. So by trying her in Arizona, it kind of secures that conviction in Idaho as well. And it just makes it doubly, maybe triply, by the time we're done, more difficult for her to get out of this on appeals and things like that.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe there was some conversation back and forth. You never know. Maybe this was an insurance policy. Gigi, let's go back to you. This one is from Desobedence or Desobetus, you. Sorry if I'm not saying that right. Angenette, I repeat the question. How much does the jury know about Lori's story prior to this trial? So, they can know about it, Gigi, but they have to be able to set aside what they know.
Right, and I'm sure that they just looked for people who knew very little, if anything. And I use this example a lot. When I was in Boise for her 6-week long trial, I would go out and people would notice my Southern accent. Why are you here? I'm covering the Lori Vallow trial. Well, who's she? And these are people that lived there for decades. So not everybody is as invested in true crime as we are. So maybe they see her picture on the news, but really don't know what she's accused of or what she's been convicted of. And even here in Phoenix, a couple of times I've had people ask what I was doing in town. I would tell them, oh, I haven't heard of that trial. So you'd be surprised how many people just don't follow true crime and really have no clue about Law Daybell and what she's done and this whole, crazy story.
Yeah, and an interesting point about that, Gigi, that you bring up. I mean, her trial was held in Ada County in Boise, which was far south. That was several hours south of where the murders occurred. So, yeah, of course, people in Ada County may not have known, especially if they aren't following crime.
And I'll tell you this too, Angenette, there are a lot of young men on this jury. I would say in their 20s. And so, I'm not saying there is a certain demographic for a true crime, but I think that could also help or helped in jury selection, that you do have a bit of a younger generation in there that probably would rather watch other things than true crime. And then you do have some middle age and then maybe one older gentleman. And I say older very cautiously. But yeah, I mean, they all seem invested and like they're paying attention as if they're learning this for the first time. I don't see anybody really ever kind of wandering off or seeming uninterested. So they're hanging on every word, I guess, to gather all these pieces to try to make some sense of this.
Yeah, and where you are too, like Maricopa County, we were talking about this the other day, 4.5 million people live there too. So that's a very large jury pool. Let's go now to Kurt. This is from Debbie Bolton. Does the council, the advisory council, give advice or only when asked by Lori? That's an interesting question, Kurt. It makes you wonder, do they ever because she's up at the podium asking her questions. So they're not standing there right next to her. So they have to wait until she sits down. So how does that work?
Right. I mean, it's a really, really weird relationship, to be honest, and it depends on who your advisory council is. Under the law, once Lori decides and is basically sanctioned to represent herself by the court, she's supposed to do the legal arguments. She's supposed to do all the legal stuff. She's supposed to do everything. Advisory council is just there to aid her. Logistics are a big thing in trial, so they're there to aid her in logistics, tell her how to get subpoenas out, stuff like that. But every counsel is a little bit different. They're not going to advise her sitting at the table like, hey, do this, say this, because then they'd be the lawyer. But I'm sure, I don't know about these lawyers, but many advisory counsel will meet with them afterwards, go to the jail cell that they're in and say, hey, this is how it went. I think they probably did that when she lost her cool yesterday and she managed to keep her cool today. So it kind of depends on the relationship, but under the law, they're just supposed to be there to kind of help with the logistics and make sure nothing tragic, I guess, happens from a legal standpoint.
So when she comes back from the
Angenette,
podium,
I will say,
go ahead, Gigi.
sorry. I was just going to say, she does talk to her advisory council on a very regular basis and her investigator as well.
So when she goes back to the table, Gigi, from the podium after she's done cross-examining a witness, I mean, is she kind of like, are you getting the vibe that she's like, so how did I do? Or what should I ask? Or are they kind of passing notes, or what are you seeing?
Not so much when she's finished, but like, for example, when Adam was on the stand on direct, Lori was writing a lot. She was whispering a bit and she was shaking her head no several times, but it was a short cross. So maybe she wanted to go there and maybe her advisory council was like, whoa, calm down just a bit, just get up there, ask these questions and be done. But I watched and, he was on the stand for a half hour and she was nonstop writing and whispering. But like you say, that cross was short and sweet. So, but no, she does talk to them on a very regular basis. Her investigator, her paralegal, and advisory council, she's active with all of them.
Kurt, this one's for you. This comes from Texas Two Pugs. Are there objections that you think that Lori could make, but since she's not experienced, she's not like she's missing objections? And she says, sorry for asking again, but I'm really interested.
Yeah, I actually do. In fact, today I was able to watch some of Adam's, it's her brother's testimony, and the direct examination focused a lot on text messages and conversations between Charles and him, around the time. And at one point, the prosecutor goes, "Well, I want to move this into admission. It's a present sense impression." What that is that's an exception to the hearsay rule because those text messages are likely or arguably hearsay. And there are some exceptions, and they were probably going to come in. But I think most lawyers would have fought like crazy both before trial and making objections in front of the jury to keep those text messages out because those are statements by somebody else that are offered, to prove some things. So yeah, I think she's missing stuff, and that's why you have a lawyer. Would it make a difference in the end if those objections were made? Maybe not. But even as you said, or as the judge said when she objected to cross-examination or redirect going beyond the scope of cross, she got that one right, and he let her gave her an opportunity to test or to ask some more questions after that. But there's a lot of things, very technical things that she's missing and will continue to miss because she's just not trained and experienced in this.
And makes me wonder if the advisory council is not kind of prompting her or kind of saying, hey, you need to object. Can they not do that as advisory council?
I mean, I think they probably can. I don't know. I've never, thank goodness, been advisory counsel in a case like this. But I think I would be like, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do. If you want to listen to me, if I throw an elbow, if I give you one of these, that's probably an objection. So like, pay attention. I won't do it that much, but if it's something important, I'm going to let you know somehow. So I'm sure advisory counsel's trying the best
Yeah.
that she can.
I'm sure. Gigi, this is a really good question for you, and it's kind of like hindsight's 2020. I feel like I'm asking you to speculate, but it's just going back to January 2019. Holistic Healing Therapeutics asks, I've been following you since the beginning of the case. Do you feel like justice for Charles goes back to the beginning? If the police had listened to Charles, would we be here?
Yeah, and thanks for that, first off. But I do agree. There were so many discrepancies in their police interviews between Tylee, Alex, and Lori. There were discrepancies with Alex's version of events. We heard about that yesterday with the projectile underneath Charles and that defect on the floor where Alex said he did not shoot Charles on the ground. And it's very sad to think, but had Charles been listened to on the body cam, which we really haven't seen in court yet, I'm sure they'll be played and you'll see him pleading. And everything that he said on the body cam video ultimately was testified to as a fact in those Idaho trials and will be again here. Yeah, I do think had Charles been taken seriously, we may not even be here and know any of these people.
And Kurt, that's a good kind of question. I want to bring you in on this too. Charles asked to have her committed temporarily back in January of 2019. He went to the police and he said, she thinks I'm Ned Snyder, Morona on top of the temple. He's like, laying all this stuff out for the police, and the police bring her in and talk to her. And the guy's basically like, well, you look okay to me, and so she doesn't get taken in for this temporary commitment. And, it makes you wonder, gosh, where would we be had she possibly been taken in for that mental health evaluation? So how is that really hard to get somebody temporarily committed?
It's always, well, hard is probably not the right word because it can be done here. It's just always a difficult decision. And in this case, I think police officers were put in a position to have to make a decision that maybe they're not trained to do. But in Arizona, you can be involuntarily committed for up to 72 hours and evaluated by psychiatrists and medical professionals. And then if they want to keep you beyond 72 hours and it's involuntary, you have a right to go to court and have a hearing and present it all to a judge, and then a judge makes a decision. But really, before that, this involuntary commitment, it's a total judgment call. And we've seen Lori in this trial, and she has different personalities. She can turn it on. So I don't know what happened in that interview with her with the police, but she probably turned it on and is like, I don't need this. I'm fine. And they made a judgment call. Unfortunately, like you said, hindsight is 20/20. A judgment call turns out to be the wrong one in this case, which is tragic.
Yeah, it breaks my heart every time I look
Lori,
at that body camera video. Gigi?
yeah, but Angenette, she did turn herself in voluntarily for that psychiatric evaluation, and she was released just a few hours later.
Okay, but she wasn't held, I guess, as for, she did. Okay, so I misspoke. I apologize. But it doesn't sound like this was a thorough a couple of hours versus maybe somebody really digging deep. I mean, we might be in a different place.
Yeah. Right. They had the order. And so when Charles took her purse after she took JJ to school back in January, he had that order for her to be picked up for this psychiatric evaluation. When Lori went to the Gilbert Police Department to report Charles had taken her purse, the officer essentially told her how to avoid being picked up. In other words, if we knock on your door, you don't have to answer. They were telling Charles at the same time, you can bring that order here, and if we have that order, then we can do something. But it never manifested there in the police station. But she did, and that was something she bragged about, was, hey, I went, they released me a few hours later and said I was fine.
All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up for us. Gigi, we got 2 more questions for you because court will resume here in a little bit. So keep the questions coming into us in the YouTube chat. Kurt and I will take a bunch of them, but we got 2 more questions for you, Gigi. So the first one comes from TH, and TH asks, does the jail/prison have a barber shop where Lori is getting her hair done?
Some jails and prisons do have barbershops. Some commissaries and jails and prisons allow you to buy hair dye and things of that nature. And then there's just good old-fashioned creativity. They may use toilet paper rolls to get the curls, or I've heard of various things they can use to do themselves up for court, using Kool-Aid for lipstick or just regular number 2 pencils for eyeliner. There's been a couple of hearings where people noted her makeup looked very amateurish. So I always say she wraps her hair around the bars to get them big curls. But yeah, no, you do have access to things in there, and but not anything like a flat iron or a curler. So somehow she's getting that. But remember, she was a hairdresser, so she knows what she's doing in that area.
She knows all the tricks. And somebody had actually told me last year, or maybe a couple of years ago, that she was using Jolly Ranchers to do the lipstick. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just what somebody told me. This is the last question for you, Gigi, before we let you go. This comes from the Law&Crime staff, so forgive me, but everybody's loving the green chicken enchilada recipe. Could you get us the recipe? I don't know. I don't know if you can talk to Lori about that, but everybody's wondering the green chili chicken enchilada recipe, please.
Look, I might get kicked out of court, but I will stand up and be like, excuse me, Lori, can I get that recipe? Or look, I mean, she's emailed me in the past. Maybe I'll just email her after trial and be like, girl, Law&Crime Network, they want that recipe because you did it for every family gathering. But here's the thing, though, be warned, it's obviously not memorable. So I don't know if you want it or not.
Yeah, and, I'm not sure I want to take any cooking tips, maybe. But I won't eat it if she makes it. How about that? But maybe I'll try the recipe. Gigi McKelvey, thank you so much. It's been so fun hanging out with you. We'll let you go so you can get a bite to eat and get back into court. And we'll see you another time. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, Kurt, you and I will take it from here. We've got plenty of
All
questions
right.
rolling in. So, guys, keep those questions coming. So, what Gigi just mentioned about them taking her for a couple of hours for this evaluation, not a 72-hour, it doesn't sound like there was a 72-hour hold as you were talking about or anything like that. I'm not sure what you could do in a couple of hours. But somebody was asking here, Cheryl Cooper asked, can the family sue Arizona for dropping the ball? I mean, it wasn't really the state of Arizona. It doesn't sound like that dropped any balls, but are there any grounds there? Because I mean, Charles did go. It's on body camera, and he's saying, "Look, she's saying all this stuff," and then, I mean, she was taken for apparently a couple of hours and talked to, but it wasn't. I mean, I don't know what you can get done in a couple of hours with a mental health evaluation.
Right. They probably did a basic evaluation. I don't know for sure. I guess
Yeah, none of us
to
know.
answer the question directly, I'll say what one of my old law professors 30 some years ago says, like, you can always sue it, but the
Hmm.
question is, can you win?
Hmm.
And there's probably some arguable grounds for a lawsuit and something like this for some sort of negligence. But to be quite frank, I think there's probably not a likelihood of success in
Hmm.
something like this, because what we forget when they're evaluating somebody for a 72-hour hold or something like that, they need to make a finding in Arizona, or the doctors need to decide that she's either like immediately, imminently a danger to herself or someone else. And we know what the result here was, but at the time of that evaluation, they didn't find that, so they let her go, I presume. And, you know, the possibility is there's nothing wrong with her, that she just
Hmm.
planned this, that this was a plan the whole time. And if you're evaluating somebody that there's nothing wrong with and this is their plan, there's not much a doctor can do because they're not going to tell you.
Yeah, definitely. And you could be right. I mean, maybe there wasn't. I mean, it's hard to tell because she was deemed incompetent to stand trial in Idaho for a time. So there must be some issue, but maybe there isn't a mental health issue to where she qualified for this hold, and maybe they just believe she just planned this, and yikes. I mean, that's almost scarier. So
Right.
let's go now to another one. This is from Nomad. Actually, we just kind of answered that. Sorry, Nomad. We just kind of talked about that, about the police department. But so we'll move on to Nick Core. This is for you, Kurt. Will there be any investigation into why the Chandler PD didn't arrest Alex or Lori sooner? There was clearly evidence. It seems lives could have been saved if they had. And this is Nick from England. So he's watching from the UK. Thanks for watching, Nick.
Um, I'm sure that every police agency, like they do routinely, in this case and others, is evaluating their conduct and their procedures in it. What that investigation or what that evaluation looks like, it's probably going to turn into training or things like that. But I guess you said the question was from England. It's different here too. I think a little bit different. You really, unfortunately, police really can't do anything until a crime or an act has been committed. It's difficult to be like, we think she's going to do this without the evidence uh, to hold somebody. Certainly, if they believe there's a conspiracy, there's some text messages saying, "Hey, we're going to go do this. We're going to go rob a bank." They can prevent that if they have it. But it's a very fine line, because if they jump too early, they're going to walk into somebody like me or the advisory council or other defense lawyers that are going to protect the client's rights. So, um, unfortunately, the police can't prevent all of this. I'm sure they're evaluating their conduct in it. I'm sure they've developed training from it, and hopefully, it'll just keep progressing and getting better.
Yeah, let's hope. All you can do is learn from everything every day. This is from Mad Mac. Playing devil's advocate, maybe Adam was playing it, not remembering the enchiladas to aggravate Lori. But would that be perjury?
Well, if he actually remembered the enchiladas and said he did not, and there was proof of that, yeah, I guess that could be perjury. Um, But I think in all likelihood, he didn't want to have her cross-examine him. He appeared to have this kind of disgusted look on his face, and he probably wasn't really thinking about it. And she obviously is very proud of her enchiladas, but
Yeah.
I think he was just like, "What are you talking about? We're here for a murder."
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Yeah. We're talking about Charles and zombies, and you thinking you're going to like be some kind of like celestial whatever, and you're hung up on enchiladas. Like, lady, what is your deal? So
I mean, she's proud, I
talking about,
guess.
yeah, she is proud. And as far as perjury goes, to use a food kind of thing, the state has bigger fish to fry. Let's just say that,
Mhm.
since we're going to talk about food. But let's listen to a little bit of Adam Cox. He was on the stand and he laid this all out. So here's Adam. We'll talk about it on the other side, Kurt.
At some point, did you learn or become aware of the fact that Lori and Charles were having some marital problems?
Yes.
Just yes or no, did you ever talk to Charles about why he and Lori were having marital problems?
Yes.
You yourself personally, were you aware of Lori having any beliefs that were outside of what is accepted by the LDS religion?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you were aware of that you knew to be outside the LDS religion?
Lori told me that she was in the process of translating from a mortal human being to an immortal human being, a celestial state.
That's something that the LDS religion supports?
I haven't heard of it that it's happened here on Earth yet.
Did you ever hear her talking about being married to someone that is relevant in your religion?
Yes, I have heard that.
Did she tell that to you?
I don't know. I can't recall her telling me that, but I remember other people telling me that.
Okay. Was there anything else that you recall her telling you that she believed that seemed outside the LDS religion?
Yes. There was a time where she told me that she had more priesthood authority than the priesthood.
And why, can you explain for us what that means, why that was significant to you?
In our religion, the men hold the priesthood, and she said that she's in a state where she's above that.
Okay.
I didn't quite understand it, but very strange.
So, Kurt, I mean, he's laying out the beginning of the story and what, the prosecutors are saying led up to July of 2019. So he's talking about basically trying to help Charles, and he knew what Charles was going through and trying to help Lori.
Yeah, I found him to be a very, relatively brief but really, really important witness for the prosecution, and it goes direct. Not only helps make their case, but it directly contradicts what, or I guess a little indirectly contradicts what she's saying her defense is. She's basically saying, "Hey, this whole thing was kind of a self-defense or a defense of others," and he's laying out the scenario that happened before that shows that that's just not the case, or starts to be parts of the pieces of the case to show that it was not self-defense and this was all part of a plan. um it's wild. It's a wild story, just this case alone, not to mention the Idaho case and the other cases that she's facing.
Mhm. This is a really good question for you, Kurt, because you're an attorney, so this would fall under the rules of evidence. This comes from Tilly_1237. Can they call someone from the LDS Church to ask if this is a normal belief? And she's talking about everything that Adam kind of laid out and talked about.
Yeah, they could. It
Be an
kind of like
expert,
an
right?
expert witness. Exactly. An expert witness, an expert witness doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's, um, a super scientist and smarter than everybody and has all these degrees. An expert witness is defined in the law as just somebody that has a greater knowledge of whatever the issue would be than the average juror. And of course, if they could call somebody from the LDS, like a bishop or a president, as Adam was talking about, to say, yeah, those are not our beliefs. Those are contrary to our beliefs. This is what the LDS religion believes and how it goes and stuff like that. They 100% could do that in this case.
I want to just add to something that Gigi was talking about, Kurt, with the mental health evaluation. And you and I were talking about this with possibly getting a 72-hour hold. Kathy Russin, our managing editor, she sent me a little message and said, the Gilbert police report says that Lori volunteered to go get checked out, and she checked herself into Community Bridges before being discharged a few hours later. So she's like, yeah, I'll go. And then she got checked out, and then they let her go. So as you mentioned, if she's there for a few hours and somebody talks to her, she must have, I guess, passed with flying colors that initial, whatever the screening process would be.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I mean, hearing that, one, it makes me think again, the old phrase, crazy like a fox. Like, she understood maybe at that point what was going on and that the Gilbert police might be able to get this hold. And she's like, no, 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 that's fine. I'll go do it myself. Because I mean, obviously I'm putting the pieces together, but she may have said, I'm going to be fine on an evaluation. I'm going to go talk to them. And I know they're going to let me go. So I'll do it on my terms rather than being taken involuntarily. I don't know. It's just a theory, but it seems to fit right now.
Here's another one for you, Kurt. This is this is quite a name, from Istanbul. Deniz Kurtoglu Eakin, if I mispronounced that, I'm sorry, but I did my best. Can they show Charles's video with audio, or is it not allowed because he is deceased? Thank you from Istanbul.
Yeah, they'd be able to do that. The officer whose body cam it was, or somebody that is what they call a custodian of records, could get that video into evidence, and uh, it could be played. Even if Charles is on there and speaking, because hearsay is very technical. They would say it's being offered not for the truth of what Charles said, which could be hearsay, but to show his demeanor and the reasons they did things and the reasons they didn't do things. So certainly that could come in. I suspect it's going to at some point.
I would think they would have to go back to that, because that is the beginning of this, really. Because even though they're focusing on what happened in July, it goes back, because the prosecutor the other day started her opening statement with the whole thing about Nephi, and I mean, that's how she opened it up. And so we've already heard the testimony about Charles possibly Lori thinking Charles was possessed, that he had demons, he was Ned Snyder. And that's all discussed in the body camera footage from January. So I think they're going to have to get into that maybe next week, in some testimony, and show that video to show, yeah, we started looking into this further, and gosh, we go back and we see this video from January and we're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think that's right. And remember her Lori Vallow's opening statement. She basically claimed my defense is self-defense. And this video, so long before this incident, starts to negate, again, piece by piece, that self-defense claim, because she said that Charles on that day was so angry and things like this. It just gives more credibility to the prosecution's version of events than the defense's self-defense version of these events. And I suspect the jury's going to see that video.
Chris Mass asks this question: can the jury go with not guilty because they think she's mentally unstable due to zombie and possession talk, or is that not an option due to her being fit for trial? Well, those are two separate issues, whether she's fit for trial and competent, and whether or not she's NGI. Is that even an option there in Arizona?
Well, the jury won't be given that option to be not guilt, to find her not guilty by reason of insanity, because she has been found, uh, competent to stand trial. And as far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, she has not alleged and noticed that defense. She has to notice that defense in order for them to find her not guilty by reason of insanity. But a jury can basically, when they're in that jury room, make their decision on whatever they want. It might not be not guilty by reason of insanity, but there could be a juror back there that just won't find her guilty because he's like, man, she's crazy. She's crazy. I'm not going to find her guilty. And if they stand by that, we can't ask them why they did certain things, and she could be found not guilty, or more likely, if somebody holds out for a reason like that, there could be a mistrial.
Interesting. That's always a possibility. You just never know what is going to happen when these jurors get back there and start deliberating. All right, we want to let everybody know that court just resumed, but of course we have that 30-minute delay. But court is back in session in real time. So before the lunch break, Serena Sharp, a former friend of Lori Vallow Daybell's, was on the stand, and she had, been to some of these preparing the people meetings and things like that. So that is who will be on the stand once the testimony gets up and going again. So we think we're going to get back into court just in about maybe 28 minutes for you, something around there. So let's get back to more of your questions. Keep those coming in, and then we will get you back into court as soon as the feed catches up with the delay. So this one comes from True Crime Yaya, Kurt. Is there a way to introduce the police video of Charles telling them he believes they are plotting to kill them? Yeah, we just talked about that. So
Yeah.
that's going to be a powerful piece of evidence. Can you imagine when the jury sees and hears from Charles Vallow talking about all of this?
Oh yeah, and I think the prosecution is probably just biding their time. They're going to lay out their case. They're going to lay out some motive. Motive isn't an element, but certainly motivation and motive is important in this case. They're going to methodically lay that out, and then I imagine at the right time they're going to play that video, and the jury is going to be kind of smacked in the face with that. I think that's going to be a very, very key piece of evidence.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's go now to Nancy Jo Hancock. Now, Nancy Jo Hancock is a woman who had been texting with Charles Vallow. She met him on an LDS dating site, and the night before he was killed, they actually went on a date together. So she took the stand, and this was Lori Vallow Daybell getting kind of fired up on cross-examination with Nancy Jo Hancock. So let's take a look at that piece of testimony.
On dates with married men?
I'm going to
Not
object
naturally?
argumentative. I'm going to also object under 611 for harassment.
All right. I'll sustain the objection.
Your Honor, do I not have a right to cross-examine this witness for what she has already testified to?
You can cross-examine her about what she's testified to.
So you did go on a date with a married man,
I went on a date with Charles.
but you did not know he was married.
I knew his divorce was not final.
His divorce was not started.
Okay.
Okay. So in your text messages, you asked Charles if he was a good kisser. Is that correct?
Maybe, sure.
Did he answer that text message?
I'm
gonna
sure.
object to
I'm sure he did.
relevance. Again, 611 harassment.
I'll sustain the objection for relevance and hearsay.
So are you trying to tell me and this jury that you went on one date with my husband and he told you all the details of our lives?
I'm telling you the truth, and that's what I know.
So you spent your whole date getting to know each other, talking about me.
Don't flatter yourself. No, we did not spend the whole time talking about you.
You knew a lot about me, right?
I knew what I've testified to.
What else did you talk about on your date?
Lots of things.
Like what, for instance?
Life, kids, the church, lots of things.
Okay. Did he tell you about anything about our other 4 children?
Yes,
So you knew that we did have 5 children as well?
I did.
Okay. Did he talk to you about my daughter Tylee?
He did.
Did he talk about his relationship with her?
I don't recall that.
Did he talk about the contention in his relationship with my daughter Tylee?
I don't recall that.
I'm sure you don't.
Now I'm going to object to comments by the defendant made after questions testifying.
We'll sustain the objection.
So, Kurt, I have to know what you think of all that, because obviously Lori is taking issue with the fact that Nancy Jo Hancock went on a date with her husband, a married man. Meanwhile, we've got the whole Chad Daybell situation going on with Lori. So, your thoughts?
I just think like she was real close there to showing the jury who she actually is. And in fact, she showed a little bit. That was not helpful to her. I love the one answer, like, don't flatter yourself. We didn't talk about you that whole time. This shows that she's a narcissist and ego. I'm not very smart. I don't know the definitions of all those words, but she thinks about herself. And that's what's number one in her book. And she's starting to show that here, because I mean, think about it. We're talking about a murder trial, the murder of her husband, and she's like, "Did you kiss my husband? Did he say he was a good kisser? What are you talking?" I mean, the jury has to be like, "Come on!" And she's starting to show who she is, and that's dangerous territory for her.
And I think she did show, and it's kind of high school. This is, I had said this before, this is very high school. Like, okay, I was done with him, but now you wanted to date him, and I'm kind of hanging out with this other guy, and but I want to know what he said about me. I mean, it's like, it's very high school and very weird. And it kind of dovetails really well into our next question. And it was about this from Ailes Me. Wasn't Chad married when Lori started dating him? I mean, pot kettle, right? So that is going
Right.
to, of course, come up.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you said high school. It kind of reminds me, if there wasn't a real life murder or a number of murders involved, of one of those kind of like high school type movies that I don't watch them, but that are on all the
Oh, come
time.
on,
It's
Kurt.
crazy. It's like, oh, maybe a little. Like, well, you went out on a date with my husband. Like, I can do what I want. I can date Chad Daybell, but man, my husband is mine too. So
Yeah.
that is not going to play well with the jury, especially men.
No.
Frankly, you said it's mostly men, right? They're going to be like, "Come on."
Yes. I mean, can you imagine? I just think these men, I wish I was sitting in there to watch all of this. Let's go to our next question. This is from Texas Two Pugs again. Can the judge hold Lori in contempt if she keeps violating some of the court procedures? And if so, what happens next?
He can. He certainly is going to avoid that if at all possible, especially in front of the jury. Things that happen in front of the jury, he's going to correct her. Uh, if she keeps doing it, he's going to get rid of the jury and then have another talk with her and talk about contempt. In the end, does she care about contempt? Probably not. Like, she's on trial for murder, but he's doing a very good job in a very difficult situation of controlling that courtroom. And contempt is an option down the road. He would probably use every other option first. However,
Yeah, most certainly. And I mean, it would kind of feed into her, she kind of plays the victim. I mean, I almost feel like that would feed into her kind of, I'm the victim in all of this, and nobody gets me, that kind of thing that she's got going on.
yeah, I think that's right. And that's where a lot of pro se defendants will go, "Oh, well, I didn't know, like, I've never done this before," kind of stuff. So they try to get it both ways. So the judge is going to have his hands full over the next 5 weeks, but I think he's doing great so far.
Yeah, he seems like a very patient man. Although I think he has had his patients tried quite a bit over the last week or two. This one's from Jeff Pogue. Would a proper defense attorney have allowed the prosecutor to get away with that much narrative? It seemed to me that both Lori's brother and the other witness were allowed to answer with too much opinion. How do you feel about that, Kurt?
I'll stay with my consistent answers that she'd be a lot better off with a defense lawyer that's trained and done trials. That lawyer sitting next to her would be doing a lot better job for her than she's doing for herself. I guarantee it. And yeah, I mean, there'd be a lot more objections. They'd try to rein the prosecutor in. I think there's been some hearsay that's come in that I'm sure a defense attorney would have objected. Just because you object doesn't mean the judge is going to agree with you, but it would be. Um, they'd make it much more difficult for the prosecution, I think.
And it makes a record. So
Right.
it may not matter in the long run, but it at least makes a record. Here is another one from Jada Ramirez. What happens if Lori keeps being argumentative and giving sly comments after testimony? She's already been warned about that by the judge.
Again, we can go back to Judge Warner again. We can go back to eventually a contempt citation or something like that. But they got to get this trial done, right? So if she keeps doing that, I imagine at a break or the judge will take a break, send the jury away, and scold her outside the presence of the jury. The judge always has to be really careful what he does in front of the jury because you can't prejudice prejudice the defendant. And if he starts to scold her and say, "I told you 100 times you can't do that, you can't do that," in front of a jury, that's a record on appeal that they could say, "Oh, the jury was prejudiced by that." So he's got to be very careful. But he'll do everything he can to stop that.
This is a really good question. I think I know the answer to it, but you're the lawyer here. You're the criminal defense attorney. Alicia Southern asks, all male jury possible or prejudicial on some level of my peers, even optically? Is that possibly prejudicial? I mean, Lori, she did jury selection all by herself.
I mean, the short answer is probably not, because they have a jury selection process and they're vetted, and that's who they ended up with. She could have objected to some of those jurors or tried to strike them, and maybe she did. I didn't see jury selection. But with that said, that's an issue on appeal. If she gets convicted, I have no doubt that if she's smart enough to have an appellate attorney, some appellate attorney is going to look at that and say, that's an issue. We'll bring that up. I mean, how can she get a fair trial on something like this? So yeah, do I think that ultimately it will be found to be a prejudice and help her? Probably not, but it's certainly an issue.
Mm-hmm. Becky B
Is that
asks,
the
do you
answer
think
you had?
I know. Well, here's my thing. She's the one that did jury selection.
Mhm.
So she could have done a better job at picking jurors if she wanted a more demographically diverse, or she wanted more women on the jury. I kind of think maybe she thought men on the jury, maybe she could charm them. This is my feeling. I could be wrong about that. But this was up to her. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and sometimes it's the luck of the draw and the numbers, but I do think she thinks she could have charmed. She might be able to charm him. You might be onto something there.
I mean, she could have stricken some of these people, and this is her show. You know, she's running her own show here. Becky B asks, do you think the judge is helping Lori a bit too much?
No, I don't think so. Again, I would not want to, just like I wouldn't want to be advisory counsel. I wouldn't want to be the prosecutor in this case when she's representing herself. I certainly would not want to be the judge. I think he's got a tough spot. I think he probably feels an obligation to help out a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, but he's got to hold her to the same standards. I don't think he's sustained one of her objections, maybe one or two. So it kind of makes me chuckle.
He did help her out a little bit and said that some of the testimony with her brother was beyond the scope of redirect, I believe, is what he said, and
Right.
was going to allow her to recross. But she didn't take him up on it. She
Yes, she
opted not
declined.
to. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. She decided to drop it. Let's go on to another question. This one is from Becky B. And this was really, Gigi kind of opined on this earlier, that how's the jury taking in the whole zombie dark and preparedness of people questions? Do they look as confused as I am? And she said, there was a little bit of reaction, but obviously this is the first time a lot of these people are hearing this. So, and they chuckled at some of the stuff, I guess, she was saying earlier. So not necessarily the, zombies and people passing away and stuff like that, but other stuff. Lindsay Erb, can somebody tell me if the death penalty was on the table for murdering her children? And is the death penalty on the table when she gets convicted for Charles's murder? If not, then why? Well, this is kind of a complicated question. I mean, it was on the table. She was facing the death penalty, Kurt, in Idaho. And then Judge Boyce struck it because her defense team, I thought this was really interesting when it happened. They said they didn't get some of the discovery in time. So he struck the death penalty, which made the case probably more simple in Idaho.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'll be honest. I don't think this is a death case. There has to be
It's
a
not.
death allegation.
Yeah, and
So that's a
the
decision.
Arizona case is not. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a decision that's made. It's a first-degree murder and conspiracy case. So it would be eligible if the prosecution alleged that. But generally, the way the county attorney's office works here is they get together, they meet, they go over the case, they decide if they're going to make that allegation. And I suspect the fact that she's not the actual shooter in this case had a lot to do with that decision not to seek death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they are doing conspiracy. She's charged here with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. And I think she would have to serve 25 years. It's like life without parole until she serves 25 years or something to that effect. So
Right.
court, it's interesting here, Kurt. Court will not be in session tomorrow. They're going to be dark on Fridays. But court is in session right now. They resumed just a short time ago. And so that means we are going to wrap things up now for the afternoon. So thank you so much, Kurt Altman, for being with us. We are going to wrap it up so everybody can take a little break. You know what that means, everybody. Go get your snacks, refill your drinks and everything so you can get back here to the live feed and on YouTube to watch Serena Sharp's testimony. We've enjoyed taking your questions as always. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Angenette Levy here with Law and Crime. We hope you have a great afternoon. Until next time.